Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Cybersecurity Amplified and Intensified with your host, Eric Taylor, myself, Shiva Maharaj. Today we have Maxim. I will not even try to say the rest of his name because I will do him the injustice of butchering it. And he is from LimaCharlie.io. What's going on, man?
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I got to ask, what is LimaCharlie? How'd you come up with that name? Because it just sounds like Meal Team 6 type of stuff there.
Right. It's kind of a mix, actually. There's really two stories behind it. So the official one is, I used to work for the government. And so NATO alphabet loud and clear is really kind of the clean cut answer for it. But the indirect answer is that when I started doing some really early stuff on LimaCharlie, which used to be an open source EDR, I did that while I was working in the south of France. And there's this little cafe where I would go every morning to work with my laptop. And there, it's not a thing. Or at the time, it wasn't a thing at all. So they're really patient with me. And the cafe was called Cafe LC. So it was a little bit of a homage.
There you go. So what exactly is LimaCharlie?
So it's always an interesting question to answer because we don't have a label that we can put on, right? I kind of wish we could say,
sell it.
We're SOAR, right? Yeah, exactly. Really what we do is, we do security infrastructure as a service. So what that means is, think of all the primitive solutions that you need in cybersecurity, let's say starting around EDR. And we offer that like AWS offers IT solutions. So we kind of see the EDR as our EC2. So that means you go to LimaCharlie.io and create an account. It's free. There's free tier. You're not talking to salespeople. You don't have to negotiate long-term contracts. So we get a lot of people in IR that really like it because they can just say they get a phone call from somebody that says, oh my God, we've been hacked. I'm sure you've been there. And then they can just,
He's an IR guy.
Nice. I'm surprised in that more gray hair than that.
It's coming in. It's coming in.
Oh yeah. So they can just hop onto LimaCharlie.io and they can, create the tenant. It takes 10 seconds. And then they say, you know what? I need 5,000 endpoints. Go. And then they get it, in a couple seconds and then just get going.
You say they create a tenant. They're creating an instance to call home to send the data, of course. But more so, they're getting a installer that's generated.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We think in terms of AWS, but what that means is we're multi-tenant, right? So if you have 10 IRs going in side by side, you don't want to create one big bucket with everything and then try to manage everything.
Sharing data?
No, that's going to go great. The lawyers will love it. So you could create all those tenants. And the idea is it also allows you to leverage kind of all the things that are in LC, right? Because I mentioned EDR is the big thing, but for IR, we have a bunch of kind of peripheral solutions, just like you'd get in AWS, that allow you to do really cool stuff. So the big use case we talk about for IR is, hey, you get your installer, you're right, or you create multiple installation keys so you can customize, tagging on endpoints, all that stuff. You deploy it. And then most IR folks, what they do is they have a rule pre-configured. You can use a CLI to push a config to your tenant because we're very infrastructure as code. And then it takes in all of the raw Windows event logs. So that's the first thing they do. They deploy it. They say all raw Windows event logs.
Does it pull in Sysmon?
Yeah, it will pull in the files from disk, and then we're cloud-based. So it all goes in the cloud. We parse it all for you. And then you can build rules or use Sigma rules, which is easier, that just look for stuff directly in those. And then we have real-time Windows event logs. So, you don't have to go deploy a forwarder now. It all streams in real time. And then maybe you want to do memory dump. Well, you can do memory dump at scale. So you could say I have 100 endpoints. I want to do a full memory dump of the whole thing. And you don't have to kind of start thinking about physical, like provisioning of stuff. It just all goes into cloud. You can download the raw memory dumps. So it's kind of really, that kind of ecosystem, which is why I say there's no labels, because we have an EDR and it's a pro tool, right? This is not for like the mom and pop shop. It's designed for people that do security for a living. But it kind of gives you a ton of power, that you're able to kind of bring in and do a whole bunch of things with it, right? We have an EDR, but we're not an EDR. We have a ton of SOAR functionality, but we're not a SOAR because we also have an EDR, right? We do log ingestion. So maybe you're doing MDR and you want to say, you know what, I need like all my CloudTrail logs because I want to look for anomalies in those logs. So we have that as well. It's all very cybersecurity specific though. It's not like, we're not a Splunk where it's like, oh, it's all about prepping. No, it's like you're trying to do cybersecurity stuff. What are the APIs that you need? We're API first. So you have Python SDK. So we've got people in IR, they have a Python script and literally they deploy on 5,000 endpoints and they just go run. And it has, their, 200 lines of automation of like, here's all the exact things I want to get done to get fetched to the list. And then they just write that, dump it, do whatever they want with it, or automatically do stuff with it, isolating hosts from the network and all that stuff.
So when you're doing this, you're pulling all this stuff in. Are we able as an IR firm to then download the entire repo? That way we could put it into F-Response, Maximum Exxon, or whatever tool that we want to use?
Yeah. So we have a thing that is outputs. So like at a super high level, the way we kind of see the map of LimaCharlie is we have sensors. So that's going to be our EDR, let's say CloudTrail, but also Carbon Black. You can bring in your Carbon Black sensors in there. We have the core.
CrowdStrike?
Not yet. We're waiting for a request for it. It's super easy for us to.
We got two. One from me, one from Eric.
Awesome.
We're not your customer, but we want it.
Perfect. We'll make a note of that. By the end of the week, we'll have it. So yeah, we do kind of all the retention. So we have 1 year of full telemetry retention, not just detections. Then there's a rule engine. We kind of, do all that stuff in the middle. And then there's the outputs, which is what you were talking about. So you can say, hey, my data's coming in. I want, all the DNS traffic from all of the EDR boxes that have a tag of VIP to go to my Splunk instance here. And you can create as many as you want. So it means that you can have LimaCharlie be like the staging area where like everything goes. You don't have to worry about scaling. And then as you go, you know what, I have this other product that needs this thing. And what we emit is all JSON. So you can start, pulling it out, or you can hit the APIs and just like hit an API via the SDK or whatever that says this sensor just starts streaming me all of the data you've ever seen.
So LimaCharlie is not a replacement for an EDR for a CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or anything like that. You are a bolt-on for IR purposes, correct?
Not quite. It will depend is the real answer, because it depends when you say EDR, what you have in mind, right? Some people think EDR and what they think is like, I'm doing incident response. I need to be able to, get forensic data from the endpoint and do stuff about it. And so it's the very kind of, in the weeds kind of thing. That's where we live. Some people think EDR, they think kind of antivirus, right? Like it's the thing I put on my grandma's computer.
Not talking about MSPs like that. They think they can buy EDR, not use it, and they're protected.
We sell breaches, right? It's like, it's not that simple sometimes, right? So we don't.
Is that a dig? Hold on. I heard you say that before in another podcast.
Yeah.
So let's
that sounds like a whale dig at a certain favorite partner of mine.
Look, everybody. The real thing is everybody does a good job at cybersecurity. Except for I don't know. I don't know because I can't touch those products. I have no idea. I've never used CrowdStrike because I can't touch it with a 20-foot pole because I have to step through 4 different vendors to do it. Pardon me?
According to your LinkedIn profile, you used to work for CrowdStrike.
Yes, that's right. That was before the product actually existed.
So you were there when they were an IR company?
like employee 100 kind of thing. So really, really early on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, now in the grand scheme of things, that was really, really early on.
So with that, I mean, if you were there when, so those who don't know, CrowdStrike was originally formed as an incident response company, kind of like what my firm is and some other companies are that we deal with, Kroll and Codeware, things of that nature. And CrowdStrike over the years has evolved into this big mammoth freaking giant that it is.
Yeah.
So with you being there at CrowdStrike, does LimaCharlie have like the RTR function in there? So that way, if we wanted to drop Cape, we wanted to drop whatever into these endpoints and start running stuff, we are able to do that or no?
So what's RTR again? Can you remind?
Real-time response.
Okay.
Basically, it gives you a shell.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like one of the feedback we hear pretty often is that in terms of the ability to run whatever you need to run, like we tend to be better is what we hear. Again, I haven't tried them, so I can't really
say anything different.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing, right?
I
Like
do the same shit. It's okay.
I'm a security guy, by like nature and by my past kind of thing. And what I really wanted to build was, I got a little bit tired of hearing the same thing over and over, which was, hey, we need security tools that anybody can use. They just like, you put a guy right out of university, point and click, they can do cybersecurity. And it's like, okay, I understand why we would like a universe in which I could take my grandma and she could stop a cybersecurity attack by Russia at General Motors. The thing is that really going to happen? Let's kind of be honest, right? If you look at IT, parts of IT have gotten better. Like I can go on Squarespace and build my website, and that's great. But the reality is that for a lot of folks, IT's gone a lot deeper, right? They have started using AWS. And so like they're building their architecture for their company. They're building the solutions. So I see cybersecurity kind of like that. So I think, we put ourselves specifically in a position where, look, we're month to month, fully documented online. Anybody can see what we do. There's a free tier. There's no place to hide, right? We're not going to hide behind having cocktails with the CTO. And
how are you priced outside of the free tier?
Outside of free tier, the off the street pricing. So you drop a credit card.
I mean, you don't have to say how much, just like, are you, the pricing model, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, we are $250 per endpoint per month. That's with a year of full telemetry retention. So that's all.
$2.50 or $250?
$2.50. And so mostly we're priced per endpoint, but we're adding a lot of solutions. So let's say you're ingesting CloudTrail, that's going to be like based on volume. But again, I think right now we just went into the open alpha for that. And I think our pricing is 15 cents per gig ingested, and that's for a year of retention again.
The reason I ask about your pricing model is because I'm very wary of anything with a free tier. And if you're a free product, you're selling my data. If you're a free product, but you charge for it after a certain amount of time, hopefully you're making money that way. There's a new vendor in the MSP space called Gradient MSP. It's completely free. You read their privacy policy, they're selling your data 10 ways till Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing. Totally. So our free tier, you have access to everything, but it's 2 endpoints, limited to 2 endpoints and 2 tenants that you can create. After that, you have to pay. So we don't leverage user data or do anything like that.
The free tier is enough for you to poke around, learn the lay of the land, but not to really do an IR unless you're dealing with a mom and pop.
Exactly.
They're probably not going to pay you to do it anyway.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And because we're an infra company, we don't have services. We don't do IR. We're not a SOC. We're not a threat intel team. That is, I'm very adamant about that. And so
we'll talk again in a couple of years when you become another version of CrowdStrike. Those IR, and then Eric will be your competitor because he'll have his own EDR at that point. But
I'm just trying to get halfway to the level that Kroll is. That's all I'm saying.
Screw that. Go for 150% accrual.
I mean, by the time I retire, I may be able to.
Are you, so with LimaCharlie, can you pull in data from 365, Duo, Salesforce, or any other SaaS application?
So that's what we started doing with that alpha, open alpha thing that I mentioned. So we started with kind of two things. So one is we focus on the technical part of it, meaning S3, for example, because we support S3, that means we get Carbon Black, we get CloudTrail. So if you can output it to S3, you're good to go. But we do have like some SaaS platform specific stuff, like 1Password that we have, where you can hit their API directly and it streams the data into LimaCharlie.
What's your plans, if you do have plans for it, your time frame for bringing in 365? Because I think that's going to be a basic of what you or anyone in your position would need to ingest going forward, or even Google Workplace or GC, whatever the hell Google calls their crap.
Yeah, and we do GCP, like Google Cloud logs already.
I don't use real tools. I only use 365. That shit the bed every so often, so it's okay.
But it's good to hear. I like to hear people asking for things, because we hate building things that we don't know anybody's going to use. So that's like really important signal for us.
You never heard this the saying, build it and they will come?
Yes, but you got to be strategic about it, is how I
build it all. It's in your hand, not mine. Question for you.
Yeah.
I'm a huge proponent of zero knowledge. Can you or your team get into a tenant without our explicit permission?
That's always kind of a nuanced question. I would say in terms of policy, no. So the data
policy doesn't count when you have insider threats.
True. But what we do, so here's what I mean, right? What we do is the data is stored separately, encrypted separately. People like engineers don't have access to it. What we have is we have a break glass system, right? So there's one code path. That's how we can go through this. We get approval that gets logged. It's like tamper evident. And then that goes and allows it. And we only do that if there's a critical issue that's, going to impact a bunch of people, or if we have your approval. What do you say?
Slash subpoena for a search warrant.
I'm not even going to touch that. Hopefully we never have to deal with that.
No, but seriously, I mean, it's grow as you scale. If you want to get into, government stuff, you probably need to get to a zero knowledge architecture where the end user has to grant permission to come inside. I mean, Sumo Logic has it. Some of the other guys.
Yeah, I think it's a question of, so you'll get more transparent answers from me than from a lot of people, right? So what I mean by this is there's a distinction between you cryptographically don't have access. When what I mean by that is like in your house, you have a physical key that the only way for me to be able to read your data is for you to take that key and give me something. And that allows me to kind of go and plug in and read your data. The real issue with this is, well, if I can't read your data, then how am I going to apply detection rules in real time to your data? Because nothing can read it, right? So I think it's a grayscale in the sense that like there's, awful vendors. It's one big cloud across the world. All the data is, in one big melting pot. The other extreme is like, no, cryptographically, nobody can access it, other than you.
I mean, that's what I would like to see in any platform I use, not just LimaCharlie, but,
Yeah.
Here's my problem, right? And I think Lockbitten or Conti, Eric, was it, that kind of demonstrated this in the last few months, where they are actively pursuing people to become insider threats to gain access.
Yeah, Conti and was Black Matter.
Right. So if they're doing it, if they've been doing it, it's only a matter of time before they continue to do it.
For sure. And
what's a better way to get into something than infiltrating an IR company that's using a U or any other version of you? Like that's where my mind goes. Right? Yeah. I'm not the 95% of kumbaya, that'll never happen. I like to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Sure. But you also have to gauge the trade-off, right? Because, hey, we could have like a zero knowledge, like I was saying, like cryptographically, nobody has access to your data. If you want to view it, you need to put a physical key, in your like browser, and it decrypts it in your browser.
Let's do that.
But then you're not going to get any detection, right? Like
I think the solution at that point just needs to be re-architected to bring the rules in local to that tenant where it sits within the encryption key and you can run, right? I mean, listen, there's always a way to skin the cat. I guess my question really is, that's my wish list of where all software goes, because for the first time in the history of IT, computer science, whatever buzzword we can use these days, I think people, meaning the users, are starting to realize that the only thing of real value is their data. And it's always been the valuable piece, right? Not the subscription model, not anything. The data is always the value. And I'd like to see it better protected by products.
Hey, that's a statement I think we can all get behind, right? It's just, between that and the real world, it's finding the spot where we can do things. That's how I see it, right? It's, we get asked that question, especially in Europe. We get asked pretty often, hey, we want to run this on-prem. Can you do on-prem? Very legit question. And our answer is usually, well, if you have the scale to do it, we're not against like chatting, but you do realize they will be an order of magnitude more expensive.
Speaking of on-prem, are you guys doing anything? What's your security posture like for your application, your internals, and such like that? Because I think oftentimes that is overlooked. Mm-hmm. We try to make our security better as a user of someone else's platform, but what are you guys doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Our general philosophy behind it is we want to maintain as little infrastructure as possible, because, for us to run a server, like you say, it's one occasion for us to miss a patch or something like that. So we're based in Google Cloud Platform. And what we do is we say, we try to leverage all of the native GCP services. So what that means is, instead of running our own, ELK cluster, well, we'll use things like, data store and Google Cloud Storage and things like that. So that's kind of where the architecture starts, and then translates all the way into, we're a remote company. And so what that means is, folks use YubiKeys, 2FA, right? We have forced kind of all the things all the way through the stack. We limit who has access to the runtime production environment. We have SOC 2. I know it's not a, I think we all know that's not a solution, but there
are good parts of it, but I think it tells me it's a minimum too, where this, it's like, no, you check some boxes. Great. Good.
Yeah. It's
checked on it.
Yeah. For sure. But I think it does ensure that, well, hopefully I would hope that for people that get it, it does ensure some of the basics are done, right? Like you don't have your repos open to world, really basic stuff. Now the real world, I'm not an auditor, so I can't say I have a large sample set. I just know that for us, we took that really seriously, especially because we're a 100% remote company.
So if we can, I just want to divert too much away from a couple of things that you said that kind of a little triggered me a little bit. Why I'm going to try to get this puppy of mine disciplined. You said that, you were in Google, you're in the Google stack. And, when I was starting to, do what I do as an IR and, a pen tester, I started looking at your company. So I'm like, this mofo has a metric F ton of shit in Google. So why did you choose straight up Google versus, AWS or Microsoft 365? Or what was that deciding factor for you?
There's a couple, right? So the obvious one, but it's not the biggest one, is I used to work at Google. I was in Google internal security. And so there's a part of it, there's a warm and fuzzy feeling because I saw the people working on it, and I kind of saw the ethos behind it and kind of the rigorousness of it. And I felt good about that. But really more concretely, I would say is it, very early on. So that was, me and my co-founder kind of thing. We evaluated both GCP and AWS. And at the end of the day, we just found that things were more complicated to get going with AWS. And like, here's the one experience that really kind of cemented that for me. We initially had like containers, right? We built our stuff like based on containers. And so we were like, okay, let's define what our data center is going to look like in AWS. And that means, well, there's this thing called CloudFormation that allows you to kind of codify, right? Infrastructure as code. That was a while back. So Terraform wasn't as big back then. And so, okay, let's try to use that. And, I think I spent like a week and hit like roadblock after roadblock. And then I would Google for it. I'd look for answers, and I would inevitably come to an answer that was like, oh yeah, this thing's been broken for about a year. I guess that's it for this product. And I got really like tired of that.
So when you're going down this road path, and I don't know how it works for GDPR for the UK and stuff like that, but here in the States, if we want to do anything as a subprime or anything with the DoD, it's got to be FedRAMP, it's got to be, through all these different certifications and accreditations, and Google's not there. So like as an IR firm, if we got any government contract work, we couldn't use LimaCharlie because it's in the Google platform. Mm-hmm. So is there anything down the roadmap for IRs that are doing government work?
So there's kind of like two aspects of that. So one is like, honestly, we haven't gotten to that stage yet where, we're not particularly in a rush ourselves to get like government contracts. So we haven't had that pressure. The other thing I'd mention is like, at a high level, I know that, the GCP approach to a lot of those compliance requirements is pretty different. So if I recall, like AWS essentially said, okay, this is going to be a data center that is like compliant for whatever.
Yeah.
And I think GCP went the other route, which is instead to say like, look, these regions are, and these products are compliant, but they're not like a different data center that's like segregated, like it's different. Right. So I would check I don't know if that's changed recently. I know when we investigated it, we saw that there were paths for it, but like all compliance, the data center is just a pretty small part of it. It's like SOC 2, right? When we were trying to getting, having the data center compliant, that's the easy part. But doing all the work on top. So that's why we haven't gotten to that yet. But we do have different, so we're not one cloud, right? So like we have one cloud in UK, Europe, US, Canada, and India. So that, if you need to be in the UK and because, they need their data GDPR to stay within the UK, you can deploy there, and then 100% of it is there.
So with that, you also mentioned, elk and everything like that. Are you built on the back end around elk? Because when I took a look at your platform, I'm like, this screams like Kibana to me.
Oh, interesting. No, we're not.
I mean, without the graph and everything and actually doing SQL queries like you could with Kibana, but a lot of the flow and everything just reminded me of Kibana.
Interesting. Yeah, but that's probably more philosophical than practical. So we didn't want to maintain ELK clusters. And I found ELK kind of hard to work with in the past. And ultimately, I just didn't want to have to scale it. Everything we do is designed so you can truly come in and say, you know what, I need 20,000 endpoints now, and you're up and running. So to be able to get to that, it meant that we had to rely on things that like rock solid would scale. So that's where we're based, our storage, right? If you look at the storage and searching and visualization, that's essentially some clever data store, some clever storage, and some clever BigQuery. And we kind of take those services together, and that's how we're able to do it.
Is the backend running on, or is it, the quote unquote built from the ground up?
So the most custom part of what we do is we use a lot of, we use a good amount of GKE. So Kubernetes. So we have, we're a Golang shop. So we have Go services that run in GKE that do some of the more custom things that need to be done, microservices, that kind of thing. And then all the peripheral stuff we will run on things like Cloud Run, which allows us to just say, like, here's a container, run it in the cloud and just scale up based on number of queries to it. We don't want to worry about it. That's how we're able to do things like, because we have your data in the cloud, right? Like we've retained it. You can say, hey, here's a detection rule I want to form. Let's say I want to look for a notepad that loads an unsigned DLL and makes 2 DNS requests within 5 minutes. There's a rule.
Bands that launch PowerShell.
Or that, anything you want. And then you want to say, okay, maybe you're, in the middle of like responding to an incident and you want to say like, hey, would I have seen this in the past year, right? It's not just an IOC search. It's like, it's a complex behavior. You can go and you can replay it against all your historical data. And because we're in Google Cloud, it means that we can go and say, okay, for the 30 seconds that this search is going to take, we're going to spin up like 5,000 cores and it's going to hit storage. And we know that's going to work. And then 5,000 cores burn through a year of telemetry and then get out. And that's really cool.
Now, are you able to scale that across all of your tenants? So like if I'm working, like you gave the example of 10 IR cases and I see something funky at one, and I'm like, I wonder if it's at these other locations I can do a global search for that.
Indirectly. So, the tenants are ultimately enclaves, right? So you can, we're multi-user permissions, like all that stuff. So if you want to do a search, let's say, evil.com, has anybody resolved it at one of my 50 different customers? The way that you do that is through our CLI. So in our CLI, you'd say like, I forget what we call it, like do a search for evil.com against all of the tenants that I'm authenticated against. And then what the CLI is doing behind the scene is, it's getting authentication against your 50 customers and then running the API parallel and giving you the results. So we kind of did it that way.
So with that, I mean, are we able to take action on alerts inside of LimaCharlie? So, event ID, blah, 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 happen X amount of times. We want an isolation or we want email notification or whatever the case is.
Absolutely. All the above, right? So you can say, hey, this weird thing happened. Like I saw event ID 11234, and then within 5 minutes, I saw an unsigned executable run from a removable drive. I want to generate an alert from that, for that to go to PagerDuty or to an email. And I want to isolate the box and I want to run the full memory dump on that box. So you can create a rule, and like the way we structure rules is if you see this behavior, do these things. And then we've got a bunch of things supported.
So you're going back to good old algorithms as opposed to the AI marketing BS.
Yeah, we kind of layer it.
Which is a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. You want to get the fundamentals really good. And what we were trying to do is I wanted to bring back the ability to security professionals that go like, hey, WannaCry is happening this morning. It's dead freaking easy to detect, right? Like WannaCry was not some like crazy stuff. It was really easy. It's like WannaCrypt.exe. Well, does my vendor detect it? Well, I guess we'll ask them and we'll wait and we'll see it. And they tell us, oh no, the patch is rolling out in the afternoon. It's like, come on. I wanted to bring back the idea of here's the keys. And if you want to this morning say, if I see WannaCrypt.exe, like I want to do these things, build kind of your own detections, automate the response, like do things the way you know how to do them. That's kind of one of the big things I want to bring back.
Gotcha. So how are you building this out from a programming standpoint? Do you have like internal programmers or external, the quote unquote Fiverr or whatever, or hybrid, or how does that look?
No. It's internal. Like it's security. We can't, we could have just say like, oh yeah, random programmers, code stuff. And yeah, we're going to vet the code.
Well, all the other vendors are doing it.
Are they not?
Oh, no, there's a lot of smaller vendors.
Oh,
Uruguay has been a really popular place for sourcing developers. They work at better than competitive rates, and they have a decent work product. But again, when you go that far out, you don't have the lifecycle control that you'd probably want with a security product. I think that's what Eric was getting at.
Yeah, get there.
I could see if you had an office there, and like the really familiarity with what's going on. That's one thing. Fiverr is kind of scary.
Oh, but there's a bunch of people who know your code really well.
Listen, being of East Indian descent, I can say this. You guys probably can't. But how do you know when you hire Bob in India, he's actually Bob? I mean, that's the problem you're going to have, right? Like,
and just so you know, that's why I did a really bad Jamaican, because I didn't want to do the Indian one. It's off Shiva.
But here's a question for you. I'm not an IR guy. Eric is resident expert here. How would you position LimaCharlie to him? Like, if you were going to sell him, what do you tell him? And the reason I ask this is because a lot of our audience are the end customers, C-suite, internal IT, and versions of that. So, how would you position this to Eric to say, give me your money?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, sell him services.
So you hit the nail on the head, right? So if Eric does IR, there's a series of things that we do that are great for them. But it's a very different value proposition than if you're a General Motors, right? So the around IR specifically, right? It's the ability to respond quickly and to use a vendor that's not going to try to poach that customer at the end if you're trying to convert them to an MDR. We're infra company. We build tools, never in competition with our users. Like, that's a core thing. And it's, as an IR, you want to have the ability to do your job, right? It's not about like when the blinking red light flashes, like you found the malware. You have to get in there.
And was that fucking easy?
I know, right? Exactly. I wish it was that, but it's,
yeah.
So that's like around IR. But if we're talking to, let's say, like, yeah, I always use General Motors as an example. I don't know.
We call them government motors over here.
Yeah, fair enough. At that size. But the idea there is what we bring in is the ability to reduce the number of vendors that you have, but also gain the solutions that you need, right? So I heard some stats that vary from like 26 to like 101 security vendors for large companies, which is crazy. And so part of the value that we bring in is because we take the approach of like, AWS. It means we don't target like we're SOAR or we're a SIM or we're an EDR, but we just cover a bunch of problems and bring that solution. So for example, at a General Motors, you could, deploy the EDR, and we cover the EDR part of it. You don't need Windows event log forwarding anymore because we support it inherently. So you can strip out that vendor. We also do the log ingestion. So you can strip out or probably optimize a ton of your storage costs, because now you're not storing live all of your data and storing at like $1 million a month, right? Now you're going to be paying $500 a month to get it all in LimaCharlie. And then you can optimize what you actually need to go to your storage. So it's this kind of ecosystem solution that we bring in, and we bring simplicity. But ultimately, the thing that excites me is like, yeah, reducing vendors, like that's cool. But really, it's the idea that as a security professional working at General Motors, now I can build a security posture that I actually know, right? I'm not just relying on the promise that like, well, our vendor says they stop breaches, so I guess we've stopped breaches. No, you know exactly what your posture is. You know what you're detecting, and you can engineer it in a way that works for you, right? I'm going to make a wild guess, but like General Motors probably works with like a bunch of, some set like factories or maybe dealerships. And the network looks probably pretty different than anywhere else on earth, right? The structure, how they structure things, what happens in those networks. And as a security professional, I would like to be able to say, you know what, at our dealerships, this thing can never happen. And we want to detect and we want to prevent it. And any of
got to make sure dealerships get off of this flat network bullshit.
But the trouble
what you see this, you've seen the stat somewhere about the 20 to 100 device applications, for the security stack because of the quote unquote fucking onion.
Yeah.
Right. But there was I forget who said it on another podcast, but I've stolen it since. There's a mindset shift that needs to happen where you're not buying a product to figure out then what problem it could solve. You have a problem. Now you're figuring out what product can solve that problem. And then trust it, but fucking verify. You keep saying that, we stop breaches and stuff like that, and that's always a trigger, hey, CrowdStrike, how are you? Cause that's just their tagline, we stop breaches. But, I always tend to upset, vendors. Hi, Dado. Anybody else, that I just come across because I'm always fuzzing. I'm always enumerating. I'm always doing the things that I do. Not too long ago, we were strongly considering moving over to TeamViewer for a lot of our integrations and stuff like that, because it had SAML support and things of that nature. And I started fuzzing. I started doing stuff, and found a ton of stuff. Thankfully, they responded quickly, and, they are, a little bit more secure now, but, you got to trust but verify. These EDR platforms, NDR, XDR, whatever the fuck they're going to call it.
Yeah. Snake oil.
Machine learning, AI learning, whatever, you kind of hit on a little bit before that. While an AI or an algorithm or whatever you want to call yourself will detect something, it's still going to take human interaction to verify these things. I don't see why more and more technologists, and I say that, loosely as the, this piece of crap MSPs or, one man band that doesn't know what they're doing. But they don't test. When Conti came out and said, hey, these are the VSS admin executables that we use. Me and Shiva were both like, ooh, let's see what it does against our EDR, and we started finding stuff. It's like, oh crap, this isn't good. So we had to start doing research, but you got to trust but verify. You got to dig in. You got to have that. And I wish, more people would have the curiosity mindset to be in cybersecurity instead of, I just recently slammed Vigilant on LinkedIn because their claim to fame is you could be an MSP, partner with them, and now you're an MSSP. Oh, fucking idiots. But sorry, I'm full of piss of vinegar today. But I wish people would stop being so adaptive to their security product. They take everything at face value and they're not testing the solutions, and they're not testing the vendors. Like I encourage my clients, anybody who gets past me on an IR and has me as a monthly long-term consulting arrangement and stuff like that, I'm like, please test me. You get a wild hair up your ass, start doing failed logins, start trying to download some crazy stuff. See how long it takes me and my team to alert you, hey, what the fuck are you doing?
Talking about that, if Eric was using LimaCharlie, I'm assuming if he had those rules built in, it would flag him.
Yes. So, like the, LimaCharlie, the EDR, you can have your custom rules, but you can also use like Sigma, right? Thousands of like open source rules to detect all the things. So that's really cool. And to your point, Eric, one of the things we added recently, which I think is undervalued, we added atomic red team. So now
Oh, you're singing at the altar for me. Let's go.
Yeah, we need to have a conversation after we wrap here.
All right.
You will not be privy to that.
It's the after hours part.
Yeah. So running a tournament critique to test your role on LimaCharlie, but also your other vendors if they're there, right? That's kind of the implication. So
That's pretty cool.
That just makes me want to fire up Bloodhound.
That breaks my heart.
That fills my bucket.
So I'm going to ask you a question here. You're going to not want to answer it, but you probably should because we'll make fun of you and talk shit about you. What's funding like for your company? And the reason I ask this is because doing what you do is not cheap. And I don't think anybody wants to go into a company, invest the time and resources to develop the use of a product they buy for the company to go belly up. So how secure is your funding? And do you have enough runway, you think?
Oh yeah. So I think we've got like close to 2 years of runway, to be honest. So we're not in a rush there at all. I will say another way that we've been a pretty different company is that we've had customers since day one. So like, I see some companies, getting funded in a napkin and like that to me, that's scary. So we decided not to go that route. That's fine, right? People have like $1 billion ideas and like they get funding, sell half the company on day one. That wasn't what we wanted to do. So we've had customers since the very beginning. And until a tiny bit over a year ago, we were, what we called ramen profitable, right? Meaning like there's just a couple of us and like, minimum salary, but like things were running. So funding, we're actually looking at funding right now for the next round. We've only raised, over last year, a pretty small amount of money all in all.
Which
we raised,
if you could say.
Yeah, we raised $500K back then.
Okay.
And yeah, well,
it's a lot of ramen.
It's a lot of ramen, but cybersecurity, have you seen the funding that goes on?
That's what I'm saying, right? Like 500,000. Yes, that is a lot of money, but in any circumstance, right or not, you can burn through that in minutes.
I think you can do that if you build a company and you say, day one, I'm going to hire 50 engineers and, you go like full company, full startup on day.
Pied Piper over here. Come on.
Exactly. We kind of took a different approach, right? So there's 8 of us. And that's why, you kind of joked about like, are you going to go in services? It's like, no, we really aren't, because for us, we want to be able to scale based on machines, based on our infrastructure. And so that's how there's 8 of us, but then we have customers like Carta and Snapchat that are pretty big names. So, we have not taken a crazy amount of money, but honestly, that's because we have not, we want to thread the line between growing organically and kind of, growing through funding, is how I would describe it.
Cool.
So are you doing any vetting of your partners, your clients, that they are an IR firm, or do you just let anybody interested with a credit card, try you out?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because today, literally with your credit card, you go in and you do the thing. If we're talking business for a second here, we want to try to get to the point where we can know when somebody comes in with, 5,000 endpoints, hey, are they in an IR that in a month it's just going to go away, or are they in MDR and it's going to keep going? So we're probably going to add, a little bit more information on a volunteer basis from people coming on the platform.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
And you're not going to like this.
I was going to have a question, but I'm going to save it for the after party.
What are you doing, if anything at all, to identify that ransomware groups are not using the platform?
And
I don't think any other vendor is actually doing that, or very few are, if they are, just to put you in the rare air.
Yeah, on it. So we're still at a scale where we see things coming in. So I would hope that, we would start to see something interesting, but the real answer, like the practical answer, is we're not really doing anything. And yeah, that's not good. But then again, they have plenty of other better alternatives is generally how I see it.
With your scalability, your price point.
Yeah.
It puts you in the realm of being able to be used for that. And Conti or Lockbit, Eric, they are using Atera, which is a remote monitoring and management platform that you can spin up free trials. And that's what they're using to create their persistence, drop out scripts, and do everything else. So,
Right.
Well, see,
sorry.
I don't see LimaCharlie as an RMM replacement or anything like that.
No,
I
but
do
with
see
their with their shell access.
Yeah, so that's where I was going to say is I do see LimaCharlie being able to be used as a enumeration or not a little bit of exfiltration to some degree. But definitely, when you are in a network and you are just sitting there collecting your victim's data, looking for new administrators being created, looking for these enumerations on a local domain level, not cloud infrastructure or anything like that, but seeing all that, I could see LimaCharlie being a possible use case for that. And hopefully I just am not just say all that to give hackers an idea. But anyway,
mind you, LimaCharlie is not the only one that can be used for that. That's any platform out there with system access. So let's give you guys a break on that. As I told you earlier, this is how my mind works.
Yeah, no, totally. That's absolutely fair. And that's why, we do things like we have a free tier, but it's, 2 tenants for identity. So yeah, somebody could create 100 emails and but then that would get into the scales where we would notice something or, that's the logic.
It's a trigger.
Yeah.
So are you guys going to add a true MFA to your platform instead of SMS MFA? Because let's just be honest, SMS MFA is not really an MFA.
Why don't you just duo that shit?
So that is a great question.
Can you tell somebody's been inside your platform in the past day?
So here's the ground truth of what's going on there. We use FHIR-based authentication because we don't want to maintain passwords, user and passwords and integrations and all that stuff, right? So we said, hey, FHIR-based off. It's Google. It's going to be great. I'm a little bit bitter that they've added in the last year the 2FA, but that 2FA is only based on SMS. So we look really hard whether we wanted to move to a different platform. At the end of the day, we kind of made the decision to say, okay, SMS is better than nothing. Plus,
really though.
Well, yeah, I mean, it
to some degree, SMS is better than email.
It is. That is.
And most vendor, the thing is that most not vendor, but most serious users will say, maybe use Office 365 or Google Workspace. And then if they do, then the nice thing is because we have support for that, in FHIR-based off, then it automatically gets their 2FA, right? So we see it as as a safety net of look, you should be using, an off provider, let's say Office 365. If you're not, and you don't have 2FA in that way, we're going to do the thing that we can give you today fairly easily. And we're really waiting for Google to kind of, hire that one developer. I know it's hard for Google to hire a developer, but to go and put the,
I think that's what Shiva just said a moment ago. Why not look at, Cisco Duo?
We could, I think it's a question of, or partly it was a question of pricing and a question of the time to rework everything that we do, right? For us, we have a platform, we are on FHIR-based off. And so, we're a small team, right? There's 8 of us today. So it's for us to say we're going to take 2 people and, give them a month to go and rework everything onto that other platform. That's really steep for us.
That's a good case for a bunch of Fiverr folks.
Yeah, low risk.
The high reward. The the benefit here, or the silver lining I see, is at least it seems like you have the ability to use SAML,
Yes.
an IDP of 365 or something that has the conditional access and all the other bells and whistles that may present themselves. So
Yeah, exactly. That is one area that Firebase is doing, like, or I don't know, Firebase, Google Cloud, it aligns.
it was like your whole plan is very modular, and the financial side makes sense to me because you're that scalable based on other people's resources or other people's money, meaning GCP. As long as you're selling, you're probably in the green.
That's exactly it. And yeah.
I like.
So we focus on giving the value that we know how to do it, which is providing infrastructure. I like that. I like focusing where.
And you are direct, right? You don't go through distribution to sell.
That's right. We're not against it. So we do have some like that MSSPs and MSPs that use it. Honestly, we're also compatible with products. We're OEM, right? Like AWS. So we get some people that go, hey, I want to build this really cool thing for in cybersecurity. Maybe it's like ML models or like DNS. And they go, I want to build that, but I don't have an endpoint to go and get that telemetry. They don't want to build that. It takes a huge amount of time. It's super costly. So they can just say, okay, API level, we're going to use LimaCharlie, OEM, bring that in, and then use that as like the foundation agent to bring in the telemetry. And then we're going to add our own value at the end, right? Not another agent.
You mentioned earlier, you are able to ingest EDR data from Carbon Black.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Does that mean the Erics of the world no longer deploy your EDR?
It's totally up to the user, right? So here's how that use case came about, right?
Well, the reason I asked this question is because, well, Carbon Black and I think CrowdStrike are probably the preeminent IR, EDR tools, whatever you want to call it, that most of the MSSPs use. Where I'm going with this is it's nice to reduce the number of agents on a computer, because I think the more the merrier for the bad guys. But how's your pricing model work at that point? Because we're not deploying your agent, we're ingesting from a third party. Are you just counting unique devices and billing on that?
That's a good question. So what we're doing there,
and if you haven't figured that out and that's a plan you're going to use, I take 30%.
What we're doing is usually how that comes about is like MSSPs that use us, they prefer to use our EDR because it's better, cheaper, all the things. Then they have customers.
Is it really cheaper if they already have their own EDR on there? And in the case of CrowdStrike and even SentinelOne, when you're in an IR, the agents are free.
Yes, except that at the end of that IR, if you also have an MDR business, those guys are going to come in and they're going to try to sell their services and like poach your customer, right? There's a reason they're giving you the tool for free. If you're pure IR, sure. There, the value with us is you get control over the thing you're deploying and you can really, do whatever you'd like. But if you're also an MDR, which a lot of IR folks, then like if you don't stay there at the customer, we don't stay there. So we're just 100% aligned with you. We're just a tool. So yeah, but those MSSPs will go and talk to people, and then people will say like, hey, we really like you as an MSSP, but we're in the middle of a 3-year cycle with Carbon Black. We're stuck. Can you use Carbon Black instead of that, of the LimaCharlie EDR? So it allows the MSSP to go and say, yep, we're going to break that in. And then it shows up as the Carbon Black, like, sensors, right? The list. And you get the retention that LimaCharlie offers. So like, that's a lot cheaper.
What about the billing model? Are you billing on ingestion of data and size, or are you billing on for Carbon Black agents?
Yeah. For Carbon Black specifically, we are scoped. We can get a handle on how much data Carbon Black sensor is going to bring in. And so we're charging, I think our current pricing is 50 cents per endpoint per month.
So it's not cost prohibitive, and it retains extensibility of existing platform.
That's right. And we normalize the events into the LimaCharlie format so you can run Sigma rules on top of the Carbon Blacks,
So after you run your normalization, well, let me rephrase this question. Are you keeping an immutable copy of the raw log and the normalized log, or what are you doing in that sense?
So for Carbon Black, what we do is for every event coming in, we, if you want it, you can disable entirely that conversion, let's call it. But what happens is we take the original event and then we encapsulate it within the normalized events. So if you take the final event, you go original, there's the original Carbon Black event. So if you want to build a rule that is like on a super, detail about a Carbon Black event, it's absolutely in there. But then if you want to build your rules in general, like, hey, if you ever see something evil.exe, right? Then you can use the top level normalized event.
So essentially it's 2 logs of the identical incident, for lack of a better word. Okay.
Exactly.
And immutable?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And you can forward it to some other system if you like. So that's pretty cool.
I got no more questions.
No, I'm digging it.
I like it. I like what I heard. How do the people get in touch with you? If you even want them to. He wants your money.
And I'm LimaCharlie.io, in doc.limacharlie.io and edu.limacharlie.io, because we, again, we're not in the business of free training. So we have free training courses online for people to get ramped up. Check it out. We also have a Slack community at slack.limacharlie.io. And that's where we do support, right? That's one of the perks of what we do, because we're not doing support for mom and pop. It means we do, it's security to security or developer to developer type of support. So it's a lot more direct. You're not putting a ticket and waiting for 6 months.
So many vendors come to mind.
99.999% of them.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen and ghouls that are out there on the internet, if you have made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in for yet another episode of Amplified and Intensified.com. You know what? A recent change to the platform. Shiva has put together a new website, Amplified and Intensified.com. If you have heard anything that you have liked about this podcast and you want to engage Shiva or myself, or be able to help sponsor by donating us some coffee, all the links of our calendars, buying us coffee, past episodes of both the podcast and the YouTube version are all now on Amplified and Intensified.com. Go there for all of your needs. Thank you so much. And until next time, take care.